Hello and welcome to another fabulous day with Mrs. Colley. This is Colley's class, and today we, Mrs. Colley and Kevin, who's now been named Kevin, we are going to be talking about one of my favorite topics today. So come along as we jump into the wonderful world of the Ice Age and talk about woolly mammoths. And this is right here is where like a theme song should go. Like do 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 do. Yeah, I don't have a theme song. But hey, I have Kevin. That's all that matters. So, it's good to see all those fabulous people out there today. Before I jump in, I just want to take a moment and say, hey, if you've never been, other side, here we go. If you've never been to the Sudan Mine, it's an incredible place to go, and it will teach you a lot about Minnesota history. You get to take a fabulous straight down jaunt in a mining cart into an old Minnesota mine. It's kind of not for the claustrophobic, but it's a great place and one of my favorite places. You get to ride around in mine carts with mining hats. It's awesome. So hey, I'm glad a whole bunch of you have joined in. Let's today get to our fabulous topic at hand. Woolly mammoths and where to find them. Seriously, we can find them today. I know. And yes, woolly mammoths, woolly is spelled with 2 L's. I learned something new today. All right. Well, we're going to first talk about where did these things originate, how long ago. Woolly mammoths were from the Ice Age. The last Ice Age was about 10,000 years ago. It might feel like we're in one right now. February is not an Ice Age. I promise you, Ice Ages last thousands to millions of years. February has just lasted 10 years. So it's going to be okay. We're going to get through February. It's not an Ice Age. Not yet, anyway. So we're going to get there. 2 more weeks of February. It'll be okay. So the last Ice Age, about 10,000 years ago. Mammoths have been around for thousands of years, even before that. They've been found in Asia and Africa, North America, Europe, pretty much almost every continent, except Australia. You're not going to find any there. But anyway, back to the Ice Age really quickly, just to give you an idea of how awful and cold it was. They, doing fossil records and checks, they were able to figure out that some of the ice sheets were up to 12,000 feet thick. Now, I know it almost seems like it's 12,000 feet full of snow out there, but it's not. And imagine this is ice. 12,000 feet of ice is much worse than 12 feet of snow. Promise you. During the Ice Age, we had a lot of crazy cool animals walking around here in North America. We had the Harlan's ground sloth, which, by the way, give you an idea, this right here, would probably would go about a little bit further out here, is a toe claw of a Harlan ground sloth. So just an idea, these weren't itty-bitty little sloths. These were big sloths. We also had the giant beaver, which is actually Minnesota's state fossil. Giant beaver, like an 8-foot tall beaver. Yeah. We also had saber-toothed tiger, my buddy back there, short-faced bears. We had the mastodon and the mammoth, which is what we're talking about today. There were lots of different mammoths. There was the Columbian mammoth, which hung out towards the southern end of North America, and then we had the woolly mammoth in North America. And the woolly mammoth is what we're talking about today. Now, before we go any further, people have often asked me, Mrs. Colley, what is the difference between a mastodon and a mammoth? Hey, well, thanks to fabulous reading skills, guys, stay in school. You'll learn this skill. I know how to do a Venn diagram, and with my fancy Venn diagram of science, I can teach you the difference between a mammoth and a mastodon. By the way, most of these facts today actually come from the Smithsonian, Britannica, a lot of different science websites. But the Venn diagram itself comes from the Smithsonian, which is fantastic because they took English and learned how to do Venn diagrams too. All right, so take a look at this. For mammoths and mastodons, a couple things to note. Things that they have in common, well, they've got tusks. They have similar habitats. It's around during the same time. They're also living in the same kind of location. They're related to the elephant family. They eat the same food. They're both mammals. They're very, very hairy. Some major differences, though. First of all, a mastodon much smaller. Not much smaller, but by about 5 to 6 feet smaller, shorter than the mammoth. They have a flatter head. Not something you want to, that's not really a compliment. You have a flat head. But these guys did. They had shorter legs, and their teeth were very different. They weren't flat like modern-day elephants or modern-day cow teeth. They actually had this cone-shaped cusp that were used for smashing branches. And how do they know this? Fossils. We'll get to that about fossils later. A mammoth, on the other hand, much taller. We're going to talk about how tall in a little bit. They had fatty humps on their back, shoulders, and on their backs, kind of like a humpback almost. And that actually held nutrients, and they used those nutrients in case of famine. So they didn't have enough food, or there was a drought, or they could actually live off those nutrients in their fat humps on their shoulders. They also had teeth like modern-day elephants. And I'll show you what a tooth looks like in a moment, but I wanted to give you a moment to look at the pictures. Mastodon, very flat, very level shoulders, level head. The mammoth has that more, think like Manny the Mammoth in the movie Ice Age. He looks like he's walking hunched over with his shoulders way up and the big hump on his back. Yeah, that's really what they look like. My drawing is not that good. So anyway, very quickly, mammoth tooth. And this is actually a mammoth tooth, half of a mammoth tooth. So give you a moment to think about I'll give you a size comparison to my head. Half a mammoth tooth. Now what they're talking about is they're flat. Much like cow's teeth, flat. These are herbivore teeth. They're used for grinding all those leaves and all that vegetation, so flat. Whereas the mastodon teeth have curves. They curve up a little bit more for a little bit more mashing going on. But cow teeth, very, very similar to cow teeth. Could you imagine cows with teeth like this? That's insane. All right. Well, moving on, we're here talking about the mammoth, the woolly mammoth. Here are some fabulous facts. I've noticed on these little half sheets of paper that I can get more facts on a half sheet of paper than I could on that full sheet of paper, and I have space to talk, which is awesome. So, woolly mammoth facts. First of all, their shoulder height. So, shoulder height, 14 feet. That's their shoulder height. So, add another couple of feet for their head. Just give you an idea of how tall they really were. They had 2 layers of hair. They had that kind of the hair that's closer to their body, and then they had the second layer, which was kind of like a beaver's guard hair, and it actually helped them stay warm, helped them keep water off, and that hair could be up to 20 inches long. Woolly mammoth. That's where they got that name. They had a fat layer of up to 3 inches covering their whole body. 3 inches of fat throughout their whole body, but it was the Ice Age, so they had to stay warm. They had smaller ears than modern elephants. So if you're thinking woolly mammoths had those huge, big elephant ears, no, small ears and a smaller tail too, because less exposure to the cold meant that they could keep more heat in. They had a lifespan about 60 years, and I say about, they used actually the teeth to decide about how many years these creatures could live, and some people think up to 70, but the current consensus is somewhere between 60 and 70 years. Newborns, for all those of you who have had kids out there, or all those of you who were kids at one point, newborns would weigh around 200 pounds when they were born. Just let that sink in for a moment. 200 pounds when they were born. Yeah, that's all I got to say about that. And then finally, their teeth, which we just showed, and I'll show again in a second, they had 4 molars. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And besides those big tusks, but the molars were for chewing all their food. So those 4 molars were replaced 6 times. So like, you know how you have baby teeth and your baby teeth grow out and then you have your adult teeth? Okay, that's one replacement. Imagine that happening 6 times. And basically it would work just the same way a cow does. Cow's teeth, you grind it all down, and they, once they're ground down and they're not useful anymore, they fall out, the new ones come back in. So the new ones would actually grow right in the back of their heads, and when those old ones got worn out, they would get pushed forward by the new ones, and the new ones were there. When they got to that number 6 and those number 6 teeth, once those 6 molars wore out and they couldn't digest their food anymore, then they died. Hopefully they had a really long life, up to about 60 years before that happened. And again, taking a look at this tooth, for those of you who just joined us, half a mammoth tooth. It would sit in their head like this. Half a mammoth tooth. Half a mammoth tooth. Yeah. The flat bit right in here would get, there we go. This right here, once that gets all worn down and flat and there's no edges there anymore, the teeth would be worn out, they'd fall out, new ones would come in. Really quickly, back to the hair of a mammoth. Mammoth hair. So many mammoths have actually been found frozen in Siberia that they actually have been able to collect mammoth hair. Now take a look at this stuff. It's really kind of gross. Actually, it's fossilized, preserved mammoth hair. But it's really neat. If you've ever gotten a chance to touch it, kind of coarse, and it's mammoth hair. But this is how they knew what colors they were. They were that cool brown color. If you ever get a chance and see me, I'll get you a chance to touch some very cool mammoth hair. So moving on from the woolly mammoth facts, most mammoths that have been found, most mammoths have been found in Siberia. Bones have been found in Siberia, but a lot have been preserved in the ice. There'd be avalanches, they'd freeze to death, and they'd preserve the whole mammoth in ice. It was awesome. So they were able to find, there's the hair, there's still the skin, the bones, everything was complete. So they've done a lot of studies on the DNA of mammoths. It was so prevalent in Siberia, actually, that the ivory, the tusks, were actually traded and sent down to China during the medieval times. And they were actually used for carvings and for spoons and forks and plates. But they were trading and carving and using fossil ivory during the medieval ages that they got from Siberia. They didn't really realize this should be in a museum because it was the medieval times. They said, it's ivory, we can carve this, and we should use it. So that was something I learned, which was really neat. Also, the ivory was actually, and this is a chunk of a tusk from a mastodon. It's not a mammoth, but it's close. And this is actually what the inside looks like, and the inside has rings, much like a tree. And those rings actually help determine how old this mammoth was. I don't know how to date these rings, but I could find that out and hopefully tell you in another video to find out how old this mammoth was. But if you take a look at it, that inside is gorgeous. And this is why they used this ivory, the mammoth, they call it fossil ivory, to do a lot of cool carvings and a lot of designs and neat stuff. So what you might be thinking is, woolly mammoths were really neat, but oh, what a bummer they were. They died out. The Ice Age was over. How did they die out? A lot of people originally thought that mammoths died out through hunting. Yes, they were around when the earliest people were around. When the cavemen were around, the mammoths were around, and we do actually have proof that they were hunted. No, they weren't actually hunted to extinction, though. So they were hunted, just not to extinction. What really caused the mammoths to become extinct? Climate change, a lot of weather changes going on. They were losing all of their environment. Their habitat was changing. They couldn't adapt. so they died out. Now, earlier I said the last ice age ended about 10,000 years ago. So you'd think the last mammoths would be around about 10,000 years ago. But about 15 years ago, a recent discovery in Russia on Wrangel Island actually discovered fossilized mammoth bones, and they did the they did all the cool technology to look at the bones and what they were and how old they were, and they dated them to about 3,700 years ago. So these mammoths lived on this island, and they were alive 3,000 years ago. They were still alive. It was awesome. It was so cool to find this out. Well, turns out they would have survived a lot longer, but they actually died due to none other than dehydration. The island had formed through the melting of all the ice caps during this time, and the seawater had gotten into their freshwater source. And through the study of their fossils, they found out that, yeah, they drank too much seawater, and it ended up eventually killing the mammoth herd. But good news, because the mammoths might be coming back. But I did tell you that I was going to tell you where to find mammoths. So before we talk about mammoths coming back, where in the USA can you find mammoths? Well, first of all, here we go. All right, first of all, La Brea tar pits. Colombian mammoths are mainly found at the La Brea tar pits. If you've ever been there, they're in Los Angeles, California, in the middle of the city, and they're incredible. There's also, if you've ever been out to South Dakota, the mammoth site at Hot Springs, South Dakota, has an incredible dig site where you can actually first see the museum, but then go out and help dig up mammoth fossils. Very cool. If you're really looking for other places to go besides those two that are kind of touristy, you could find them in Siberia, Alaska, Russia, Canada, Illinois, Ohio, or my favorite current 3 states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. We'll talk about Minnesota first. The most recent full skull discovery of a mammoth was actually back in 1996. It was over in the Albert Lea area in a farmer's field. Guys, a suggestion to all you rockhounds out there, make friends with your fellow farmers. Every year they're tilling up new ground and they're tilling up new rocks, and you would be amazed by what is discovered in farmers' fields. So 96, they dug up a full skull and a tusk. This skull of the woolly mammoth from Minnesota is currently in the Minnesota Science Museum. So go take a look. It has a little history about it as well. Then Wisconsin, for all my Wisconsin people down in Kenosha, in 1994, a full skull was discovered with two tusks connected to it. This is currently in the Milwaukee Science Museum, so go take a look at it there. And then finally, the most recent huge mammoth discovery was in 2015. If any of you were teaching with me at that time, you know, or were my student at the time, I freaked out. It was awesome. In Chelsea, Michigan, which is in the lower part of Michigan, a full skull and 2 tusks was recovered in a farmer's field, along with 60 complete mammoth bones. It was the largest discovery in the last 30 years. In Minnesota, not in Minnesota, I wish. In Michigan, they've also recovered 30 full skeletons of woolly mammoths and 300 skeletons of mastodons. Michigan is the place to be if you want to go woolly mammoth hunting or mastodon hunting. But I still think you've got a nice shot in Wisconsin and Minnesota. Talk to the farmers. Now, finally, I kind of hinted at this earlier, but woolly mammoths might be making a comeback. Oh yes, I'm serious. Take a look at this. The Harvard Woolly Mammoth Revival team. Yes, it's real. It's a real thing. Go look it up. It's being headed up by a geneticist, and they're actually looking at how they can take woolly mammoth DNA and use it to change the Asian elephant and be able to repopulate some of the colder areas of our world with these Asian elephants that now have the DNA of a woolly mammoth to allow them to live in colder climates. So they're not necessarily saying, let's take a bunch of woolly mammoths and just put them everywhere. They're not ready for that yet. But they are saying, let's take some of the cool aspects of a woolly mammoth and how it survived in the Ice Age, and let's put it in with the Asian elephants genes, and then we're going to put them in a whole bunch of locations that it's nice and cold to prevent the species from becoming extinct. How neat is that? So again, Harvard Woolly Mammoth Revival Team. Look it up. They've got a whole website. Very neat. And they've got some cool events going on around the States as well. It's cool stuff. So anyway, that is my fabulous spiel on woolly mammoths. Don't worry, the snow will stop. I promise. It has to. June is just around the corner. I hope. So we're not going into another ice age, but it was still kind of fun to learn a little bit more about the woolly mammoth. Thanks for joining me, and I hope we don't have any more snow days, but if we do, I'll see you back here. Thanks. Bye.